So excited to see what you're going to do.
Well, welcome everyone. Today's episode is very special because the tables have turned. You are going to hear me speak more than you have heard me speak on podcasts before, and yet I am not the one being interviewed. You see, today we are interviewing your very own Dani Meyer, and I can't wait to consolidate your origin story into one episode. Because I think for diehard listeners, you probably have pieced bits and pieces of Dani's origin story together. But first of all, Dani, would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Dani Meyer. I'm a section bassist for the Omaha Symphony and VP of Artistic. And I am responsible for the Serena that you are getting today.
And she is also the special guest because she is the brain behind the next OCMS concert, which we will talk about in a moment. But I feel like I would love to take this opportunity to dive into the Dani Meyer origin story. Many listeners are big fans, and I feel like we deserve to hear this. So, what started out as a desire to play cello, how did music start? Where did music start for you?
Okay, so I did think about this morning because I wanted to be ready. Um, I remember kinder music. I do remember that. Like, I remember the tiny glockenspiel. I remember all the parents in like a tiny room and hitting things. So I do remember that. Um, but all my parents started all of us on piano. So when we were six, we all started piano. So my brother's 18 months older than me, and then my little sister's 3 years younger than me. So that was our first instrument. And um, my brother played violin, and I know I played violin for half a year before we moved to Buffalo, New York. And now I can place all the blame squarely on Mrs. Joan Boysenalt, who recently retired from the Heim School, middle school and elementary school. She's the best. Seriously, Mrs. Boysenalt was like the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I didn't want to play violin anymore because my brother played it. And I don't know if you've heard a violinist when they're first starting. Um, it is not a kind instrument to start with for most people. My brother's a very good violinist, and I was not interested in making bad noises with that thing at the same time as him. And so I signed up for cello. I was like, it's hard enough to have two siblings who do things really well, but like when you want to carve out your own thing. So I signed up for cello, and Mrs. Boysenall told me, unfortunately, there's no cellos left, but no one's playing this bass in the corner here. And it's a quarter size bass. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just a cello. It's just a big cello. And to top it all off, she promised to give me lessons before school. So I'd come in and it'd be like 7:30 in the morning, and she would give me lessons before the school day started. And she'd let me play the cello part if I wanted to, and I wanted to. And then um, she would start having the vice principal of the elementary school walk me across the parking lot to the middle school so I could play with the big kids because I was the only bass player in the elementary school orchestra. And she just kind of did all this like insidious um beneficial shoving me into more and more things. Like I have a memory of pushing a bass amp up a ramp at the middle school because at some point I started in jazz band and the amp was approximately the same size as me. And I just remember a teacher looking at me and being like, should you be doing that by yourself? Like Sisyphus with a rock, just like shoving this amp up. So that's how I got started because Mrs. Joan Boysenall is the absolute best. And she tricked me into feeling very important and then never let me not feel important after that.
That's what a what a compliment for a teacher. I mean, shout out to all of those that made every kid feel important. But I feel like the bass opened doors for you because when you then moved back to Delaware, is that correct? Then being the only bass player created certain opportunities, right?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. And again, you have to understand this is all from the perspective of like a 12-year-old who doesn't, I was a very naive, very brave, very dumb kid. And so it wasn't until college when, and I, pardon my French, got knocked on my ass by a very good studio bass players at IU that I realized like, oh, okay, I'm out of my depth here. But at 12, there was a community orchestra that didn't have a bass player. And Delaware, especially at the time, was a band state. And so I could play bass in band. There were always bass parts because in wind ensembles, actually, they very famously incorporate bass a lot. So I could do that. And I loved my band teachers, like Mr. Bronio in middle school was also my favorite people of all time. But there were no orchestras. And so this adult community orchestra let a 12-year-old audition using my George Vance book, which I remember that too. Um, and they were like, fine, we need it. We just need somebody. And it was Monday nights from like 7:30 to 10 or something crazy. And so my parents would drop me off and they'd pick me up and we played real music. I'd never seen a Beethoven score before. I'd never seen Stravinsky before, Prokofiev. I was convinced that because I grew up listening to Sting and the Police, so I was convinced that Prokofiev stole the Lieutenant KJ romance theme from Sting as opposed as opposed to Prokofiev being blatantly ripped off by Sting for Russians, which makes a lot more sense. It's a great song, by the way. It's a fabulous song, but like I'd never played any of this music before, and this orchestra was awesome. And we played all this stuff. So my first year, like we played Beethoven 6, we played Beethoven 7, we played Bizet Carmen, we played Firebird. I learned more in that first year with that orchestra, not because I had amazing teachers, but it's such simple stuff like, oh, on a Beethoven part, the cello and the basses are on the same part. And so it's not a choose your own adventure. You play the bottom part because you're the bassist. That's what you do. It's learning that. Or Stravinsky taught me like harmonics and how to read extension notes because I've never had an extension. But in Stravinsky, like he goes below the natural low E. And so I had to learn to read below that standard low E for the first time. I had to learn to read treble clef on bass. I knew how to do it because of piano. I had to learn how to play in thumb position to play key J. And all these adults let me do it, which I think is just the coolest thing ever. Like they actually brought in another bassist to play key J with me, but they had him play the bottom part. They let like dumb me play play the key J solo. And to this day, it's like I don't even remember how it went, except that they let me do it, which is the coolest thing in the whole world.
I mean, out of like great opportunities, you don't know what's going to come of. And I think it's such a beautiful thing. There's so many um amazing organizations out there even now that just like try to give those opportunities, and I feel like that's such a common story among musicians where, oh, if this one person hadn't given me this thing that I was definitely not qualified and far too young to do, I wouldn't be here. But okay, your musical life started on the bass, well, on
Mhm.
piano, and then bass and all that. How did so now as part of your job, you do a lot of programming for the symphony, right? We'll get into programming for the OCMS, but your job for programming for the symphony, um, was playing and being exposed to all this music already kind of the start of you conceptualizing programs, just the way you experience them? Was that kind of how you experienced those concerts? Was the bass your gateway into that? How did that, was that always an interest?
Um, so it does all go back to OCMS actually, because I have a distinct memory. When I was down at Brevard, I was singing something from Harold in Italy, Berlioz's Harold in Italy, and I was like, "Though this is how this goes," and I sang it, and one of the teachers was like, "That's not how that goes. That's the bass line." And it was this idea of like the melody is always vastly more important. And I don't know if I agree with him, but I admit that when I look at programs, there is this feeling of like, well, I hope this is going to be fun for us because I'm looking forward to digging into it. Like it seems like it would be a good time. But it goes back to OCMS because in when we moved to Omaha in 2012, they needed more people on the board. I wanted to be a part of anything that allowed me to make music, right? So education, we had this great hospice program that just really stuck with me, and chamber music. And so at first I was just on the board and you volunteered, you help with concerts and marketing and getting the word out. But then 2016 came back from our honeymoon in Germany and they needed new people to step up to lead. And you're looking around the room and it was kind of it was I wouldn't say it was unexpected because I think for the people who were ready for change they knew it had been coming for a while, but for me it's like, oh wait, okay, this possibility had never occurred to me. And it's like, well, I have the time, so why not? And suddenly it was this crash course in the fun parts, the curating, and it's learning, okay, what's the rep? What have we done? What goes well with what? What's a learning very, even with this program, learning that just because I think these pieces go well together doesn't mean it's going to be a natural lift, that it can, in fact, be quite difficult for everybody to do this. Or if you have a major string quartet on the second half of a program, then you need to be kind with the first half. Like, how do you divvy up a rehearsal? How do you learning all of that and then learning how to talk about it and how to fundraise and how to market it, how to set up chairs. It's all of the things. And I did that for 7 years before I stepped down. But like my third year of doing that, the previous me left the symphony to go to Nashville, and James Johnson, the CEO at the time, asked if I would be interested in applying for the job. And I didn't go to school for arts admin. I intended to be a bass player, and that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And suddenly it was just like, well, hang on. I could be a kid in a candy shop and I could do that for a living. And I could figure out what this means. So it was a crash course. And then the symphony was another crash course because of, it's not really your vision. It's you're translating and you're finding what's possible and not possible for the artistic leaders of the organization. So that was a massive education too. And this is
Yeah,
sauce if you're watching video.
um, I think, yeah, I mean, starting with OCMS is very interesting because with the smaller forces, there is a very human aspect, I think, to programming where you really take into account the humans in front of you who are putting this program on. And it's not just what can one human being do with the time that they're given, of these rehearsals and with this much music or whatever, and even the humans that are best suited for certain kinds of, sometimes you meet certain people and you go, wow, I would love to hear this person play this piece or something just because of something, a quality in their playing or something. And so it's such a fun puzzle, I'm sure, to fit. You have a piece in mind and then you try to fit the people, or you have people in mind and you try to fit the I there's which I think as you get larger with symphonically, it's not really about the individual because we are such a collective in the symphony. But with chamber music, it's such a special feeling to watch like a soloist essentially, but a group of soloists together, which is so beautiful. But I would love to hear now. So, kind of what came first here? The like, was it one piece that kind of anchored this whole program, or did you have several pieces, or were you like, I really want to collaborate with these people and this is how we're going to make it happen?
It's the octet. It's the Francais octet. Um, I fell in love with, I think the theme of this whole concert is I fell in love with this thing and now you all are going with me. Um, and the Francais octet is definitely that thing for me. Found it during the pandemic because we were looking for chamber music that could be performed with like larger groups, but still not needing to be conducted. I'd never heard of it before. I frankly hadn't really heard of Jean Francais before, so like that was a really big deal. And then you hear the opening. Okay, so you know when like for baseball fans, you know when you're going down your Spotify rabbit hole, right? And you're listening to about like 9 hours of wind ensemble or wind and string ensemble albums back to back to back to back. And it's kind of all melting into each other. And then suddenly you hear the one thing that makes you just stop doing everything and pay attention. And that is the opening of this octet. And it is such a bait and switch, not because the rest of the octet isn't perfect, but because you have the most gorgeous sunrise, nostalgic writing, especially between clarinet and bassoon. When they come in and they start it and they get it going, and you just have these beautiful string and horn chords underneath, it just like arrests time. And then because he's such a French piece of work, he immediately like he lets you like sit with it, and then he transforms it into this massive zany escapade for the rest, like for the next two movements. So I keep it's like how do I sum this up to an audience like 2 seconds or less? It's as French as champagne and cigarettes and satire. Like that is this octet, but it starts so exquisitely that is like, I forget everything else on this list. This is the only thing I ever want to listen to. I listen to it on repeat. And the moment, I'm so grateful Judy and Katie asked me to do this. The moment they said, we'd want you to curate a concert, it's just like, it has to have the octet. And then from there, I've definitely just like given Agatha Blevin the concrete block that is violin one on this program, and she is hitting it out of the park, which is a mix of metaphors. She's doing beautifully with this huge lift I've given her. But I was trying to find pieces that would go really well with the forces that were in the octet so that nobody felt either neglected or overworked.
So,
So,
just as an overview, what are the forces in the octet?
so string quintet, two violins, viola, cello, bass, and then bassoon, clarinet, and French horn.
Quick side tangent. Is there a reason the flute is not involved in your program?
Uh, I'm gonna blame Francais. It is not actually, and I can blame Francais because he's okay. So Francais is considered, quote, like the last of the French wits. And so it's this generation of French composers who wrote music for pleasure, but they're always laughing at you about something, and you almost never know exactly what. But he was the last of them. He was kind of up there with Poulenc, but then Poulenc became very religious at the end of his life, and Francais never went that way. So in 1972, Willy Boczkowski of the Vienna Philharmonic asks Francais for a companion piece to the Schubert octet because they're gonna play that on a concert. And so I'm imagining what Billy is thinking is that Francais, because he's known for music for pleasure, is going to write them this tiny little bonbon that they can then read through, and then they'll have all the concentration they need to put on this hour-long Schubert octet. I've played the Schubert octet. I adore Schubert, but like you have to be obsessed with Schubert to voluntarily take on this octet. It's a lot of Schubert. And so then they get the music, and it's like a candy wrapped bomb. It's so hard. It's so hard. And it's perfect. But it's like he literally, it's virtuoso writing for every instrument. And Francais kind of had this, apparently, this like, he was irritated about the fact that everybody heard his music and went, oh, that's delightful. It must be so easy. And he was like, you clearly haven't played my music because it's not easy at all. And I think he was just doubling down. He's like, all right, you think you're just going to play this through once on a dress rehearsal and then get onto your Schubert? Like, my friends, you are sorely mistaken. And it's when you see it live, you will understand where the difficulty is. It is constant. It's so fun, but it is constant.
Well, I mean, I feel like that could potentially be a theme of this bonbon wrapped
Yep.
bombs
Hmm.
of,
Hmm.
I mean, Strauss till Eulenspiegel is another prime example of something that sounds so fun, but is
Yeah.
so difficult for the orchestra, which you have
Yeah.
now condensed into this chamber version. Um,
I didn't
and
condense it. Franz Hasenerl condensed it, to be fair.
condensed, which I feel like makes um, every instrument have to play the part of three instruments. First violin is also the conductor,
Hmm.
as explicitly stated in their part. Agatha
Hmm.
is doing a great job, I heard, um, doing a lot of leading
Hmm.
in this. How how did you find this piece of all pieces, and how?
So you learn really quickly. You find um, you find either ensembles who do cool things, or you find albums that contain the instrumentation that you need. So when I was looking for, it's like anything that the Beethoven had the Beethoven septet, anything that had the Schubert octet, anything that had. So you start digging through because people, these chamber groups do like to record if they have to use a larger force or something, a weird instrumentation. They like to be as efficient as possible with their album. And that's how I think I knew about the Strauss. I think the symphony actually did it on a pandemic program, but I'd forgotten about it. And then I was combing through
Wow.
options, and there it was. And I, still being a naive, confident 12-year-old bass baby, was just like, this is perfect. This will let us use our wind friends, and they won't feel like we've neglected them. And I think if you ask our wind friends, they would have felt fine with the Francais.
Yeah,
It
I
would
was
have
gonna
been
say.
fine. But um, cheers, they sound great. Rosario Gallant on clarinet, Nick Nelson on bassoon, Jordan Dinkins on horn. They just are, oh, they sound so good. And of course, Aggie is tremendous as the titular to Eulenspiegel, going bonkers all by herself in that very lonely violin stand. But she's a master. She's doing so great.
That sounds like a treat.
I would call it a treat. I would call it a 9-minute treat while we will be treating ourselves to Gatorade after.
Yes, I was going to say, but that's not even the end. There are two more pieces, three more pieces. We're starting with In Nomine a 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I don't know this piece at all. I don't know Gibbons. Is it a religious
Um,
piece?
that's that's a great. The short answer is I believe yes. So what it is, it's for viol consort is what it was originally written for. So viola da gamba, the predecessor to the cello especially, but just in general, the string family. Um, and he's like the British composer connection between Bird and Purcell. And
Uh,
because he actually died younger they think he died of a brain aneurysm, I think in his 40s. His son taught Purcell, but his Orlando Gibbons music was included in a book with Bird's music, which was a really big deal because William Byrd was one of the greatest Renaissance era composers, especially like England. England has a poor chip on its shoulder because they had a very long time between very famous composers, and William Byrd is considered kind of like the last really famous one for a long time, before even like 20th century names came up. So they kind of co-opted Handel for a while, but
Yes.
he's in fact not.
I was going to say there's this we odd association we have with Handel and the English, but no, I mean it's such distinctive music too. Just like the style was so not like localized, but very regional at that time because traveling wasn't as popular until Handel and Haydn, and, as they're traveling, but like to play this, what makes the Gibbons so distinctive, you think?
It's this melding. So most of the pieces on this program, as Juliet Yoshida could go under the theme of look at these weirdos, and and she's not wrong. Um, the Gibbons though is a completely different sound world, like you said. It's coming from a place where you're watching these tones mesh together and then break and then remesh in new ways and then break. It's going to feel very, very old, and it should because it's hundreds of years old. But it's coming from a place where everyone's tone is supposed to sound very similar. Everyone's approach is very similar. And so to have, especially later in the program, you have all these characters that we're all bringing out in very specific instrument qualities. And here it's this glorious, these voices coming together for these incredible suspensions. And all the while, like, I think what's coolest about an in nomine piece is this idea of I want to make sure I get this right. The cantus firmus.
Hermes.
Yeah. This idea of here's a piece of music or a line that we all agree is called this, the in nomine cantus firmus, but every composer does something different with it. And so it's like having, in my mind, it's kind of like having a popular tune or something where everyone just is remixing it, but you all agree you're going to call it like "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time" A5 or "Frere Jacques" A5.
Yeah, I guess like at that point in time, and for anyone who hasn't gone through music school, the way we learn about cantus firmus is that's our line from which we base our counterpoint exercises off of. We all learn to write counterpoint, and then at that time they kind of, yeah, I guess they took it as that theme or the melody, the one thing that's constant that then gets remixed depending on who's writing counterpoint, depending on who's composing.
And
And
you
then
notice, like, right, it's in nomine A5. And so it's like cantus firmus, here's how many people are involved. So it's not in nomine number 236, whatever. It's cantus firmus for this group. And he did so many of these because they called it a consort of viols. They were very, very popular. They can be extremely robust. And I'm going to give him a shout out because his name is Alan Garvin, has a fantastic collection where he has been cataloging, typesetting, and sharing Orlando Gibbons' work for viol consorts. It is all there. It is all available. He was absolutely lovely. And then our library made it look super pretty and put it on nice big paper for me because we're all getting older and progressively getting harder of sight. Um, but it's five moving lines all at the same time. Lucy Duke is holding down the fort with the cantus firmus, so we are using her as a lifeline, and it's in 4/2, which means like instead of a 4/4 where every beat is a quarter note, this is like that's the simplest one. We all know that, I think, instinctively. A 4/2 is four half notes in a bar, so it's twice as long. And so you have this phrase that seems just like endless. And it's amazing how something that's still in four can just like stretch out like taffy because of it.
A little, I guess, extra fun fact on that. Like,
Mm.
why would he write it in 4/2 rather than 4/4? Like, why would composers do that? I think, if my music history
Mhm.
is, if I remember correctly, um, like note values were kind of just based off of um, the speed at which certain uh, religious not necessarily songs, but just texts, anything were sung. We didn't establish bar lines. And from then, we would establish bar lines for some regularity, but there was kind of an implied tempo relationship with the length of notes rather than saying, well, half note equals blank or quarter note equals 132. It could equal 132 or it could equal 60, depending on how specific we get. I think at that point, since it was based off of chant, that's the word I
Mm.
was looking for, chant, and um, the way just each one was sung, that was the length that we would notate. And if we wanted it at a certain speed, then they would be notated in half notes. But it's just, I guess, something that's carried over now, and it doesn't have to be written in 4/2, but it was the way it was notated then, and what
And
we read.
Alan, I mean, obviously, Alan did a modern musician a huge service because I think even if you just Google Renaissance chant, and you get a chance to look at the imagery of it, you're absolutely right. Like it's very frazzling the first time you see it and you're trying to read it and you realize here's this entire world of people who have just been taught by ear that this is how this goes, and then they're attempting to notate it in a way that makes sense for people who may not read music even the same way. And then you have people like Alan who hundreds of years later have to find a way to be historically accurate, but then also allow for people who aren't steeped in hundreds of years of this music history to come along and read it down, like five string players in Omaha, Nebraska.
Well, if you should all come to this concert because you are about to hear a piece of history
Mm-hmm.
happen in real time. Like, I think that is
Mm-hmm.
so special that yes, these five players from Omaha, Nebraska have deciphered that what was written down, and you'll now get to hear this medieval tune. Okay, so we're starting with that. We
Yeah.
get to do um programming option number one, which is compare and contrast. And we get to contrast with
Mm-hmm.
Francais.
Mm-hmm.
We get to add some more fun with the Strauss. Then we go into, okay, I have a note here, Dani, Serenade in C major.
Edited and transcribed by Frank Proto. This is, for me, this is the hardest piece on the program. I think if we didn't have Strauss on here, it probably would be also the same for maybe Aggie. I don't want to speak for her, but I think Strauss obviously takes the cake. This is, I never heard it before. I was looking for a piece, a really good like string piece for the second half, and stumbled onto this one. And it's originally written for violin, viola, and cello. And Frank Proto, um, great American bassist, composer, arranger, Cincinnati legend, had done a transcription, and um, I I have no idea why he put baseball players on the front. I honestly I don't know. I don't get it. He has really weird covers on all of his. I wonder if I have it. My friend Brian Sherwood just gave this back to me. Oh, my camera went out. We're gonna try to get this back on. It didn't. Zoom was like, I don't want to see that baseball stuff. There we go. Okay.
Oh,
Do I still
hold
have?
on.
Yes. Okay. This
I
Zoom is,
don't see you.
my camera
There
is,
we
there we
go.
go. Okay.
No.
It really does not want to show this cover. Okay. Maybe there's a copyright violation if I show this cover. Okay. Maybe we're having issues with the camera. That's okay. I'm gonna keep trying. Regardless, Frank Proto has a an interesting habit of putting weird covers on his arrangements and other things. I'm just going to leave the camera off for a hot second. Actually, this could be a simple case of unplugging it, and plugging it back in. Let's see if this works. That's also a copyright violation. I definitely did not sing the thing you just heard me sing. Um, okay, but going back to Proto while we wait and see if the camera is going to start functioning. Frank Proto, he had that same I love his whole world changed because he was getting ready for a recital and he wanted to play something that was American and that used electronics or looped tape. That's what he wanted to do. He had all of his, other standard stuff going, and he was like, I just want one more piece. And he couldn't find anything. Not for bass or just like in general that he could play. Couldn't find it. And so he decides I'll write it myself. And he changed his whole world. Yeah. Yeah, just
Well,
completely
I'm
was like,
American.
why not? And so not only did he start composing for bass, but he eventually would become essentially the composer in residence for the Cincinnati Symphony, which he was
Wow.
for decades. Um, he did so many arrangements for them as an orchestra, but then he also started on this huge endeavor of classic pieces transcribing different parts for bass. And so I've played his music before. I've played some of his solos before, and I've played this Glier that I won't attempt to show you because apparently it curses the camera. But you should know that the cover is two baby angels from a Christmas tree decoration, and I don't know why. But he did. I was so happy to find this Donyan. How do I Don Donanyi
Don Yanni. I think it
Donyani.
is. Yeah. Don Nani. Don Yanni. I don't.
I was delighted to find this work by a composer whose last name I'm unfortunately butchering, and I'm so sorry, Maestro. It's five movements. It's uh, it's simultaneously whimsical and rough and like super folk heavy and light and romantic, and like you hear this theme in the first movement and then you don't hear it again until the very end of the last movement when you are so battered and tired and raw, and it's perfect because it's just like wait till you see Juliet's face when we have to get to this part because like she's just like I'm done. I'm so and it's it, it's great.
Is there some like do we know why he like for what reason he wrote the piece or anything?
I don't think so. I do know
Okay.
that Donyai was considered like the Beethoven of Hungary, is my understanding. And so he came before Bartok. He was someone that all these younger Hungarian composers really looked up to. And so I think this is just one of those pieces that he composed as part of his output. And maybe there isn't something particularly like, special behind it, but it is a gem of a work.
Yeah, I one of my favorite pieces is one of his string quartets, his second string quartet, I think. That I always felt like it sounded like someone in love. And I realized that him being the romantic that he is, he really wrote it for his wife. Or something about, or for their wedding or something like that. It was really tied to something really romantic. And I thought, okay, serenade in C major is there. I don't know if there's some romantic story for the soft heart. He
It could just be that he's a lifelong romantic. Some people some people are like that. I there's it's an opening march. It's like very childlike in a lot of ways, a very
Ooh,
toy-like opening march. A romance that really features the viola, which is gorgeous, a scherzo that is the scariest thing known to man, a theme and variations that is great for all of us, and then this rondo at the very end that is just kind of like packing as much funfetti into the cannon before it finally explodes.
nice. Then to end, we're only one movement, the fourth movement of the Meyer string quintet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this guy.
Ooh,
Um, okay. So first and foremost, Edgar Meyer is one of the greatest bass musicians, but first, hands down, greatest musicians of all time, especially greatest living musicians. There's a reason why you see this man constantly connected to Yo-Yo Ma, to Tessa Lark, to Bella Fleck, to Chris Thile. Like he's just really good. And which is the dumbest thing I've said today. He's just he's a phenomenal musician. And when I was growing up, we always he'd write a concerto or he'd do a recording and we would covet these recordings. And we had there were like those who walked among us who were good enough to potentially play these concertos also. And so I remember one of my youth orchestra friends was trying to get Edgar to give him the music to one of his bass concertos. And Edgar said no. And we couldn't figure out, like, why isn't he publishing all this great music that because he's writing constantly? Why isn't he publishing it? And at the time we thought, like, oh, he's protecting himself from us. He doesn't want to hear our interpretation of him. And the reality as an adult is after finally finding a piece by Edgar Meyer that, in fact, he allowed to be published. This is from 1995. He was protecting us from him, and and understandably so, Edgar, because this piece is written for bass tuned C extension EBEA. It is notated throughout at pitch rather than transposed up an octave. The following instructional videos will help in preparation of the bass part. So let me explain for baseball fans why he is such a massive, why his music, why he is saving us from him. Clearly, his brain works in a way that he has shaped and disciplined his mind to work in a way that is so flexible that he just can do this. And the rest of us are light years behind him. And what he's doing is one, he's tuning his bass at solo tuning for the most part. That means that most strings are a whole step above where they usually are, which means he can play higher and he can play louder because it just projects more. Two, he's got a pea shooter instrument with an extended fingerboard and an extension, which means he can play higher and he can play lower than a lot of bass players, which is important when you're going up to stupid notes like a high, high, high E. And I don't know the like E number, but I'm measuring it like this. Like that's the E. Um, he's he's putting it at pitch. Bass is actually naturally an octave lower than cello. We read the same clef. So, but if you gave me and a cellist the same music and we played the notes on the page, I would sound an octave lower than that cellist. And we learn it reading the same clef because if we didn't, if we read it where it actually is, then it would be so far below the staff, we would just be reading like tuba ledger lines. And if you looked at a tuba part, that is disgusting. There's so many ledger lines like going down that they have to just eyeball. It's like, oh yeah, it's a low F. Like, okay, how did you count so fast? Um, Edgar's doing that because if he writes it, if he writes, if he does what all other bass composers do, where they know you'll use solo strings, they actually write it a step down, and then you put your finger there and the string going up a step naturally takes it to where it's supposed to go, which is also a mental thing that you have to wrap your head around. But Edgar's basically like, look, I'm just going to tell you what the actual note is, and then you figure out how you're going to play it. So we are doing the last movement, which was always the plan. But I am so grateful that we are just doing the last movement because one, it's possible without me retuning my instrument at the very end of the concert, which was really important to me. And two, it's just for all of that, for all of the Edgar Meyer, I'm going to write you an angrily worded letter at some point in the future. For all of that, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. It's so rewarding because, of course, it is, because I can't even be mad at him because he wrote this like exceptionally um, exciting feature that just like naturally makes every string instrument sound really good and tops everything off and just is explosive and like brings back our friends Zach and Lucy, who have been sitting quietly since the Francais finished, brings them back so that they can like star in their own right finally. Yeah, so we are going to be in vast need of electrolytes at the end of this concert, but like it's so worth it.
It's the Danny Meyer special. That will not
No
be
one
the
will
it's
no
not the
one will
only
ever let me
concert.
do this again.
The Gatorade.
Hmm.
The Gatorade special. Well, I am looking forward to being there Sunday, 3 p.m. at the Omaha Conservatory. We will all see you there. And
Hmm.
so, to conclude, one last question that we ask everyone that the audience has not heard your answer to yet. I don't think. If you had
Hmm.
30 minutes on stage, I don't even have to ask the rest of the question. What would you pick?
I I waffle. I think I have mentioned that I would love to conduct just one at like a Prokofiev 5 or a Shostakovich 9, I think would just make my whole life. But back when I was still adequate at piano, I finished up high school by playing Rhapsody in Blue with my high school band, and that was one of my greatest memories of all time. But if I could conscript the orchestra into playing Rhapsody in Blue with me at the piano, I think I would also, that would be a treat of a 30-minute romp for me.
You could play and conduct. You could conduct the parts where you're not playing, and
Hmm. And they wouldn't leave me like my high school band director did by abandoning me in the middle of an accompaniment section. Mr. Satcher, I will remember that you cut something and you didn't tell me you were cutting it. So it was a very Jurassic Park moment. Like he left me. He left me.
no,
So,
we have to like, redo that experience one
mhm.
day. One day. Hopefully
I'll get
with
my chops back up.
exactly. We'll give you enough notice to get
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, as we always say, it has been a joy. Thank you for doing this. And I absolutely look forward to this crazy, um, crazy program of featuring the bass, featuring your Danny Meyer.
You're the best. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you. It was